Good evening to our valued audience and speakers. Welcome to this highly anticipated YAWDA webinar under the theme Unite, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls. Today we explore how and where we can invest to eradicate violence against women and girls. My name is Zengani Mbambara, YAWDA P&C member. I'm an environmental engineer and sustainability expert. It's a pleasure for me to moderate today's session. You're all welcome. So as we start, I'll run you through the etiquette. So when you enter the round table, make sure you're on mute. Remain on mute throughout the round table. Ensure your camera is off. Type your questions or comments in the chat box only. Put your name and country first before you answer or respond to any comments. Those whose questions or comments are selected will be asked to unmute and speak. And lastly, if you're asked to speak, you must introduce yourself by name and country only, please, and then repeat the questions or comments you typed in the chat box. Okay, and to get us going, let me just run through the background and the introduction of our topic today. So it is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, observed annually on November 25th, resonates as a global rallying call to prevent and eradicate violence against women and girls, promote gender equality, advocate share knowledge and innovations, and emphasize measures to address this pervasive issue. This year's theme, Unite, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls, urges collective action, stressing solidarity across societies, governments, and organizations to combat violence through proactive investments in preventive measures. Shockingly, an estimated 736 million women globally have experienced physical or sexual violence, highlighting the extensive reach of this issue and the urgent need for action. Research by the IMF highlights how violence against women and girls possesses a significant threat to Africa's economic progress. According to UN Women, even a marginal increase in such violence correlates with a considerable 9% decline in economic activity. Liberia has taken a significant steps in addressing violence against women through legislative measures and community engagement, while Rwanda stands out for its commitment to women's empowerment. Evident in its high representation of women in politics, with women holding nearly 2/3 of the seats. Youth-led initiatives such as Girls Not Brides campaign in Uganda actively engage young people in advocacy and awareness, raising efforts to end child marriage and protect girls' rights. He for She in Kenya mobilizes young men as allies in the fight against violence against women. These initiatives contribute significantly to prevention efforts. We would like to recognize Lorato, Bananos, Fatima, the authors of this beautiful webinar concept note that I've just read to the lovely audience and all the presenters on today's webinar. So, my name is Zengani Mbambara. I'm a YAWDA P&C member and I'm an environmental engineer from Zambia. I'm glad to be your moderator today. Then our speakers, starting off with Anastasia Duru, a psychologist from Tanzania. Then we also have Anton An, policy analyst and head of conflict prevention and analyst unit at the Nkafu Policy Institute in Cameroon. And then we also have Fadous Mohammed, lawyer and founder, Sirad Initiative from the Somaliland. We also have Yusuf Mani, Programs Executive and Gender Mainstreaming Consultant from Egypt. We also have Fadet Moneziro, Deputy National Commissioner for Communication, the Burundi Girls Guides Association from Burundi. We also have Mariam Florence Yusuf, PhD student, Department of Anthropology, University of Oslo, founder of Sardine Organization in Kenya and Norway. We also have Jesus Eki, Chief Technology Officer, Humanics from Senegal. We also have Josephine T, Yao, the Executive Director from the University of Ghana, based in Ghana. So our overall question for today is, globally, an estimated 736 million women, almost 1 in 3, have experienced physical or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both at least once in their lives. 30% of women aged 15 and older. Reflecting on these statistics, what have been the main contributors to these staggering statistics and their increase in recent years apart from the COVID-19 pandemic? What signs must we look out for in our communities that someone is affected by GBV? So this is our overall question, and it's in 2 parts. So Anastasia Duru can kindly unmute and be the first to share your thoughts and ideas on this question.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My ideas on the questions are, so far, I feel, my name is Anastasia Duru. So far, I feel like the government has done a lot from the various days to this time. We see like there is so many so many things that happened under GBV have been prevented in some sense. Take for example, female genital mutilation, example in Tanzania, early marriages, they have reduced to some extent in Tanzania. If you look back in more than 5 to 6 years, the things that they faced women and girls so much. Also, some things like early marriages and other things faced like the women's girls in Tanzania. But if you see for this time, so many areas, and when you look to female genital mutilation has reduced to some sense that you see the children who were in the rural areas have developed going to school and doing other stuffs more than being mutilated and getting into early marriages. And also we see even in the leadership kind, women have been included more. And in the problem of what contributes to this, I can say Tanzania, I feel like more contributors, I can talk about harmful gender norms have been a thing that brings more problems to the women. We see the contributors, what have been the main contributors to this staggering statistics and their increase in recent years apart from the COVID-19 pandemic. We see something like harmful gender norms have increased more gender-based violence. And these norms are like when a person or a girl has been victimized in the sense of maybe faced an abuse, maybe physical abuse, or has been raped, or has passed this traumatic experience, we see like these girls are being the ones that are victimized in the society, either by words or being told like they are the source of whatever happened to them. So these harmful gender norms and the discrimination that these girls face, I feel like they are the other main contributors that leads to the increase of gender-based violence. And what sign must we look out for in our community that someone is affected in gender-based violence? Since I am more in a psychological area, I can base in that area. I feel like we can look when there is many signs that a person who has faced or has been affected by gender-based violence can show, but I'll base in these areas. When you talk to young girls or young women, they can show psychological symptoms or signs such as painful urination. A child um, can can complain about this issue as more frequently, like when she goes to urinate, she is going to complain about this. Another thing is poor concentration or inability to remember stuff. The person shows this sign after the traumatic experiences. When you face gender-based violence, there is so many things, so many traumatic events a person can pass through when they face that experience. So one of it will be poor concentration and ability to remember the stuff that the person is going through, maybe the time or the place. You might talk to this person and show like she's not there by that particular time. Another thing like the sign, another thing that can be a sign is low self-esteem. This person, since has faced that experience, might see herself or must start judging herself and see herself very different from other people, other peers that have surrounded her, since she starts to first complain to herself like, I have allowed this, to judge herself that she has allowed it. So at that time, she will see herself like she is not the same as other peers. Another thing that can act as a sign is irritability, being angry with everyone that surrounds the person because of the thing she's complaining, she's having internal conflict. So this will be shown, since she cannot speak out as loud, afraid of the society, what the society will say. She might start showing anger issues towards other people. Another thing is isolation. The person might start staying alone, even if at the first time she likes to stay around another people. And when she's around another people, when you show any signs maybe of, maybe you want to clap or something, this person may show signs like flinching and other signs that might be in the society. Those are my answers in that general question.
Oh, thanks, Anastasia, for that beautiful submission. Uh, just an addition concerning time, we should keep our responses to at least 3 minutes or under 3 minutes so that everyone has a chance to speak. So the next speaker is Anton An. Kindly unmute and share your thoughts and ideas. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Greetings to everyone. This is Anton An. I'm reacting all the way from Cameroon. Privilege for me to share my experiences and perspectives on this very sensitive issue, which is plaguing our continent and the world at large. I'll be sharing experiences or perspectives relative to much of what is happening in Cameroon. I believe if we address local realities, we will be setting the pace and mechanisms that are going to permit us be able to address regional or global realities. So you're very correct to say that there has been an increase in cases of gender-based violence, be it physical, be it verbal, be it sexual abuse, and all sorts of violence which we can imagine that are particularly linked to gender. You already said that besides the COVID-19, which actually is one of those causes, there are many other causes. I would like to touch a little bit on some of those causes or those contributing factors based on what is prevalent in Cameroon. The first main cause of this evil, which is disturbing in Cameroon, I would say is conflict. For those who are familiar with local realities in Cameroon, we currently have to security-related crises that are plaguing the nation. In the far north region of Cameroon, where there is a dominant Muslim community, and in the northwest and southwest English speaking regions of Cameroon, where we have a largely English-speaking community, and these conflicts have been ongoing for quite some time now. And it will interest you to know that we are talking about statistics, but in Cameroon, as of the year 2021, that's just post the COVID era, 56% of women and girls were already victims of gender-based violence. And so the first cause of this is naturally related to conflict. The ongoing conflict in the northwest region of Cameroon and the far north region has led to massive sexual abuses on women and girls. And so I'm talking about statistics that are documented. But if we want to dig deep into statistics that are not documented, cases which are not reported, you'll be shocked to find out how many women and girls are actually victims of gender-based violence. So that stands as one of the main contributing factors to this increasing statistics. I don't want to undermine economic disparities, which I think is a universal cause of gender-based violence. Cameroon is one of those countries where the economic conditions, as days go by, things are getting worse. If you look at it if you measure from every indicator, so many women in Cameroon live below the average standard of living line, below the minimum wage. Many women are living beyond that. A good number of women are largely dependent on the other gender, which is, to me, one of the reasons why there is this inevitable gender-based violence, because women are not sufficiently employed, or there are not so many opportunities for women to be self-dependent. And so this over-dependence on the opposite gender is the reason why we have cases of increasing cases of gender-based violence. The third reason, which I'm going to highlight here, is there is no clearly established mechanism for reporting cases of gender-based violence and for following cases that have been reported. This is one observation that I have made based on my field trips. Many a times, women get to be violated, but there are no clearly established procedures as to how a victim of gender-based violence can report these violations, these abuses, and in case they even try to report them, they follow up. There is no clearly established procedure on how that happens. So it leads to a situation whereby many women and young girls shield themselves in the closet because probably no one is taking sufficient measures to address their plight. So this is one of the reasons why these statistics keep on increasing. And the previous speaker said something which is quite realistic. There are societal conceptions about gender-based violence. There is the issue of shaming women, the issue of blaming women, and people don't believe what women say. Somebody may report a case of gender-based violence, and we just shy about what the women say, and we believe that these are minor issues that could be handled if they dialogued with their partners. But in reality, it's way beyond that. I believe that one of the ways in which we need to step up that is to identify the early warning signs of gender-based violence. And speaking is already one of those early warning signs. We do not necessarily need to allow the case to deteriorate before recognizing it big. So there has to be the absence of a clearly established mechanism on how people can report cases of gender-based violence is missing. It's missing in Cameroon. That's why many women and girls are still suffering. Last but not the least, there are quite a good number of them, ranging from ignorance of women about their own fundamental rights, ignorance of men about the kinds of violence. But there are insufficient measures meted by the government and all stakeholders. I would say all stakeholders, the government, the private sector, inclusive of civil society organizations that to an extent have become some sort of money-making ventures. Many a times we do a lot of sensitization, but our community-based approaches do not ensure that gender-based violence is sufficiently handled. Many a times we are on the front line of sensitization, but we don't do follow-up. That's where we civil society organizations are failing in the process. Meanwhile, we are supposed to follow up the entire process right up to this phase where we are helping women recover from the stress and the trauma they had gone through. But many a times, civil societies do not see the process completely. So it leads to a situation whereby we are doing more of advocacy, more of sensitization, but there is no follow-up in the whole process to ensure that women are adequately attended to. So I'll beg to hold on the causes there for now, so I don't dig much into other people's time. But on the other aspect of your question, which is what are the noticeable signs? How do we identify these cases in women? I would say that honestly, there are no clearly established mechanisms. The previous speaker said it, but I personally use two approaches. First, you have the observative approach and you have the interactive approach. The observative approach logically warrants us to observe people's changes in character, people's changes in speech, people's life changes. Many a times somebody has interest in, let me say, movies or sports, and all of a sudden they lose their interest in these things. There is a reason to believe that this is associated to a case of gender-based violence, which has not been detected. So one of the ways in which we can identify these triggers, these cases of gender-based violence in people in our communities is we can use the observative approach. People who all of a sudden lose their interest in things they used to love at some point. That is one of the ways in which we can do it. Also, we can look at it from the perspective of an interactive approach. Many a times we really need to engage with people at all levels. We need to ensure that young girls, irrespective of their ages, we are engaging with them, we are discussing with them. We are open to receive, to hearing what they have to say, because these are the only available channels through which we can be able to identify some of the plights that some of these young girls and women actually go through. So I plead to submit there for now, so as not to overlap into the timing. I think that we have a long way to go. So this is my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for that comprehensive submission. And we move on to Faduz Ahmed. Faduz, kindly unmute and share your submission. So Faduz seems like she's having internet challenges. So we'll move on to Yusuf Mani. Kindly unmute and share your submission.
Thank you very much. At the beginning, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about one of the most vital issues that not only affected women and girls, but also affected our societies. Regard, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you clear.
Okay. Regarding the main contributors to these statistics, we can find that in Egypt, culture norms consider it's acceptable for males to subject females to acts of violence as the males deem necessary. In addition to women are afraid to engaging with the legal and security system of the country due to the history of failing to protect women who report abuse and violence. Also, as a one who is working in the economic development field, for me, poverty is one of the main contributors of this issue. There are several links between poverty and gender-based violence in Egypt. When women endure abuse, they are more likely to stay absent from work, which cause more less income for them. Also, unemployed women are more likely to face and accept intimate partner violence as they have no source of income, so they cannot afford the basics life needs. I remember one of the focus groups I was moderating. There is a case of a woman that she didn't find any place to go for, although she is almost face everyday internet-based violence. So we can't neglect the economic aspect of this problem. We cannot neglect that we need to empower women economically first, so we can provide for them a source of income they can depend on. They can find the way out of this circle of violence. Also, we need to engage everyone in this process. We need to work on the mindsets of the community and the partners, that gender equality and stopping violence against women is not a zero-sum game. It's a win-win game. All of us will win from achieving gender equality on economic level, on political level, on society level. So we when we consider to design programs and design interventions related to gender-based violence, we need to consider these aspects. We need to keep everyone engaged in this process. It's not related to small societies and are not related to the households only. Everyone is engaged. Everyone has his contribution. So we need to keep engaging every stakeholder in the community, every stakeholder in this issue to stop and eliminate gender-based violence, as well as to find a way out for those women who are keeping fighting every day for the basic needs for them. We need also to consider intersectionality and how it affects women. In Egypt, we have several identities. We have several backgrounds for women. It's very difficult to face to design intervention that suits every community. We need to keep reflecting on intersectionality, and what can work in Cairo cannot be implemented in Upper Egypt. So we need to invest in these solutions. We need to invest in this, keeping in mind the intersectionality, keeping in mind gender norms and culture norms. And again, it's not a zero-sum game. Everyone in the society will win from achieving gender equality and stopping gender-based violence against women. This was my answers for now, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Yusuf, for that wonderful submission. Indeed, every situation is different. What works in another country can't work in another country. I agree with that. Okay, we move on to our next submission. And our next submission will be from Fedet Moneziro. Kindly unmute and share your submission with us. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for that opportunity to talk about viewers based on agenda. And what I can say, I can talk that in our country, which is Burundi, the statistics of violence against women can be attributed to several contribution factors beyond the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we can talk about gender inequality because the piloted gender inequality and the patriarchal norms contribute to the perturbation of violence against women. In our society, they prioritize male dominance and the control of parental rights, or even justify such as of violence. We can also talk about discriminatory social norms and attitudes. For example, in my country, we can see a family when they are 5 or 10 children, and if in that family there is many girls than boys, they will talk there is no children because there are no boys. That is mean that in a society, girls are not considered as a child. We can also talk about lack of legal protection and the enforcement. Because inadequate legal and the weak enforcement mechanism and the limited access to justice for survivors of gender-based violence. We can also talk about socioeconomic factor, which is poverty, because in my country, many girls, many women don't have to work as like boys, and this is contributing to violence against women. We can also talk about institutional response because that is insufficient support services, include shelter, counseling, and the legal aid. don't forget about those culture. There is some culture or practice or traditionals and interpretation of religion teaching that condemn or enable violence against a woman can contribute to the prevalence of gender-based violence. Also can talk about media influence because media that perpetrate harmful gender stereotype and portray violence against women are acceptable and threatening. That is can influence our society and the behavior. And about some signs of gender-based violence in my community, I can talk about physical injuries because you can go to the hospital and meet a girl or a woman with some cuts. He will talk that is a knife cut me, but in when you can search for what cut her exactly, you can see that is a physical injury as a gender-based violence. We can see also a small baby or a small woman with an emotional or psychological change. That is also show that that person she's vulnerable to gender violence. You can also see some girls who is in isolation in the restrictions access, controlling the manipulation. That thing is very important because when a girl or a woman in a society is a victim with a virus, he can be a woman who is in isolation. You can talk with him, but he can't answer because he have something fear. He fear about nothing because of that violation. That is what I can talk about those two things. Thank you.
Thanks for that comprehensive submission.
Thank you too.
We move on to our next speaker. That is Mariam Florence Yusuf. Kindly unmute and share your submission. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this invitation. And thank you for the speakers who have spoken before me, because I feel like most of the questions are actually speaking into each other, and we are actually speaking the same things. And so I will try to not repeat what others have already said in terms of GBV and where we are at as a continent, and also just as different countries and regions. And also I support one of the speakers said that sometimes when you're talking about GBV, we should also factor in our regional context or our different context. It might not be, of course, Africa as itself, it's embedded on patriarchal structures, but then there are also things about state, and in our different states, there are also regional based kind of aspects that are coming up in terms of GBV. When I mean regional based, I mean like, is it an urban setup we're talking about? Is it a rural setup? And what kind of rural setups are we talking about? Is it like, for example, in Kenya, is it a different, like what is happening in the Western Kenya might not necessarily be the same sense of GBV we're experiencing in the northern parts of Kenya. So it is very vital and very important to factor in what setups we are talking about in GBV. Overall, it cuts across all when you're talking about GBV, it cuts across all states and all continents and all setups, but we just have to be very clear and very alert in what context we are talking about GBV. My questions were all mostly to do with civil societies and what we are doing in terms of policy, in terms of advocacy, and in terms of investment, like future investment in terms of GBV. For policy, I think in the Kenyan context, there's a very good, I think like there are very good policies on GBV, and they might not be comprehensive in terms of how they are addressed, but there are very good policies that have been written down, the laws and all these kind of structures of systems and put in line to speak to GBV. The problem is implementation, and also it's the kind of divergence that it meets. These policies meet some form of opposition or divergence, in the sense that state laws are not well tied into gendered power relations or deeply entrenched in our social cultures, which allow this political and institutional accountability to be very difficult, because when there are laws, but then they are not really tied up very well, put in place and tied up to our cultural context and our all power relations and issues to do with gender equity, issues to do with gender roles, as someone mentioned, then it becomes so hard to keep up or to actually see its implementation and to work on its follow-up. So I think for the policy, they mean to be very comprehensive and very explicit in the way they are tied up to also other forms of power dynamics and control that are not really human rights or very globally defined. Yeah, I feel for policy, that's what we really need to be intentional in doing. And for advocacy, I just feel like civil societies have been really working hard in terms of GVV. And also my organizations work SADEN works on gender-based violence a lot. Like we focus on women. But then the one thing I always feel like we miss is in the messaging. The way our advocacy puts out the messages is not very, the headlines are not really helping in the essence of reaching out, sensitizing our communities about the matters of GBV. As someone mentioned, we mostly focus on trying to, we are always focusing on the victim, and we are not really trying to show the perpetrators of GBV. When we read headlines like "Stop Raping Women," who are these who are stopping? What are we trying to, which structures, which subjects, which people are we trying to direct these messages? Who are these perpetrators that should stop? So when we focus on raping women and we focus on the victims, which are women, and avoid the mention of perpetrators, it then misses the whole sense of advocacy, what is intended to do. Even when people who are working in journalism, when they are putting out headlines that a woman was raped, by who? Okay, what was the cause of, what was these structures and context of this rape? We should be very, very intentional on mentioning what was the context. If it's a rural area, in this rural setup where they believe in this kind of cultures and these types of things, then a woman was subjected into rape, then we have to mention all these structures so that we are very focused and very intentional on dealing with those perpetrators. It might be a person, or it might be a structure or a system that is actually causing this kind of violence. So when we just continue mentioning women were raped, a child was molested, or somebody was mentally ill because the woman is mentally ill because of GBV, then we miss the point. We're just focusing on the women and not the perpetrators. And also, somebody mentioned, one of the speakers mentioned it, but then we, as advocacy, as civil society, we should stop commodifying GBV. Like, we are so much into the focus on, of course, AIDS. We are focusing on the aid, and we are focusing on also growing our own organization and all. So we have ended up reducing our GBV as a commodity of a selling point of our own interest, self-interest. It might be state interest, it might be systemic, like a regional interest, or just organizational interest. So the commodifying in its essence means the point of advocacy. When we commodify something and we sell it in a capitalistic sense that we want to gain, and when the gain has already been achieved, we stop there. And when we stop there, then we do not see the full implementation of our causes. Like, do we follow up? If you're talking about a rape, did we follow up until the end? Did we follow up with this case to the higher level of the police, to the courts level? What was the outcome of this? And from the outcome, what can we do about it? If we stop at that point that we were funded to just talk about GBV and stop there, we are commodifying GBV. we are entering into the capitalistic world of taking all our African problems and putting them into a commodity that we need to sell as a narrative. So I think also we need to have that kind of discussion on GBV. There are other many things about GBV being spoken in the register of like an isolated case. Like we should take the script of and the register of GBV in the essence that it cuts across other forms of violence and other forms of policy and vulnerability. And when we bring on board all these other issues that, like, for example, the economical, like we need
Sorry, Mariam, to cut you short, but you have eaten in other people's time. So kindly conclude.
Okay, let me conclude. Let me just do the investment where we need to invest mostly in GBV. I feel like there are so many other places we could invest, but I feel so the school-based curriculum, investing in integrating GBV in our school-based curriculum, especially in Kenya, from the lower grade to not only the university form of, because in the university there are courses that are GBV oriented, but then I think like we should start from the preschools. Like that will be very well catered for in terms of the investment. Thank you, and sorry for eating into other people's time.
Okay, thanks, Mariam, for that submission. And we move on to the next speaker. Jesus Eki, kindly unmute and share your submission. Thanks.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleague. As we gather here today to confront a harrowing reality, globally, an estimated 736 million women, nearly 1 in 3 have faced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. This staggering statistic isn't just a number. It represents millions of individual stories, untold suffering, and a societal failure that we must urgently address. My perspective is rooted in the field of artificial intelligence and information and communication technology, and it seeks to shed light on the undercurrent driving these numbers, as well as the digital signs we can detect to intervene effectively. Let's first of all unravel the contributor behind those statistics. Let's delve into the underlying contributor of this surge in gender-based violence. Apart from the exacerbating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, several factors have been silently fueling this crisis. The rapid digital transformation, while a boom in many aspects, has also opened new avenues for abuse. The anonymity and reach of digital platforms have led to an alarming rise in cyber harassment, digital stalking, and online exploitation. The intersection of technology and social norms has created a paradox. On one hand, technology has empowered women with knowledge, networks, and voice. On the other, it has become a tool in the hands of abusers, used to intimidate, to track, and harm. This dichotomy is stark and presents a complex challenge that requires nuanced understanding and action. Furthermore, economic stressors, often overlooked, play a critical role. Financial dependency, exacerbated by global economic downturns, traps many in abusive relationships. The digital divide further marginalizes vulnerable groups, limiting their access to support and resource. How AI, artificial intelligence and ICT, can be a powerful tool, first of all, to enable early detection and proper intervention. In this complex landscape, AI and ICT emerge as a double-edged sword. They are part of the problem, but they also have a significant share in the solution. How, you may ask? By harnessing AI, we can develop predictive models that identify patterns of abuse early. These models, fed by vast data sets from social media, health records, and crime reports, can alert us on the risk factors and signs of GBV in communities. Digital platforms, when leveraged responsibly, can be a powerful tool for awareness and support. For example, AI-driven chatbots can provide victims with discrete advice and connect them to help. Social media analytics can also be used to identify and flag potential abuse cases, enabling, therefore, timely intervention. How do we recognize the sign of GBV in our community? As we deploy this technology, we must also be vigilant in our community. The sign of GBV can be subtle and often hidden behind closed doors. Behavioral changes in individuals, such as withdrawal, anxiety, or unexplained physical injury. All of them are red flags. Online, we must be alert to patterns of cyberbullying, harassment, and the sharing of intimate images without consent. Community engagement platforms, enhanced by artificial intelligence, can therefore serve as watchdogs and support systems. They can enable anonymous reporting and foster a culture where speaking out against GBV, I mean gender-based violence, is encouraged and supported. The rise of GBV is not just a reflection of technological advancement or economic stressor. Let me highlight that it is also a mirror showing us the fractures in our societal structures, as well as our societal norms. As we embrace AI and ICT as part of the solution, let us do so with empathy, responsibility, and a commitment to creating inclusive, safe space for all. Let this be a call to action for each of us. Let's harness the power of technology, not just to connect, but to protect. Not just to inform, but to transform. Together, we can rewrite the narrative and pave the way for a future where respect, dignity, and safety are not privileged, but fundamental rights for every woman and girl. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus, for that powerful submission. Indeed, technology has to be harnessed and it has to work for us and also to address GBV and gender mainstreaming issues. Thanks for that submission. We move on to our last but not the least speaker, Josephine T, to share her submission. Josephine, kindly unmute.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm really very honored. Am I audible?
You are very low. Kindly increase the volume or increase the projection of your voice so that we hear you clear and loud.
Okay, please. Am I very audible now? Am I quite audible?
You are better than the first.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I can say our speakers have really given very, very pertinent view on gender-based violence in Africa as a whole. And I really took interest in what Mrs. Miriam said about in a submission. So she mentioned we having enough legal. Please, is my projection better now?
Yes, it's much better.
Okay, so I also want to add on to what our speakers have said, and yes, so the issue of why we have the staggering numbers in Africa, why are the numbers of gender-based violence increasing along the line, aside COVID-19 pandemic, I would say is the legal protection we have in Africa. So now, aside having the laws that protects women or girls who have been violated in all means by men or by whosoever violate them, how feasible are these laws? How are the implementation policies? And yes, it's very sad in Ghana, my country, that we have something we call DOVSU. It's Domestic Violence Victim Support Unit. So they are basically established in order to protect the rights of girls who are victim of violence. They handle all cases involving domestic violence. But the question is, how feasible are these policies? How feasible are these acts? So yes, you see, in the act, Domestic Violence Act 2007, one of them says all victims who have been violated sexually would have access to free healthcare. So, because if you report a case to the police station, they want you to undergo health screening. So yes, and in the act, they say the health screening is free. But when these girls go to the hospital, they have to pay for the sexual screening. And if this girl or this woman is less privileged, she doesn't have the money to pay, it means that the case just dies like that. Because if I don't have the money to pay, the doctor won't run the check on me. And obviously, I can't give my full report to the police to act on my case, which is very bad. And I'm very, very glad that some pertinent associations in Ghana are really working on that, are fighting for there to be free healthcare for women or girls. If not, the perpetrators of sexual violence against women and girls will target on the people who don't have money, on these rural areas, with the girls who are less privileged, because they know that once they violate them sexually and they're going to report the case, they wouldn't have the money to go for health screening. So obviously the case will be as well like rubbish, and it will be a foolish case. Please, do you understand? And yes, I also say female genital mutilation is also one of the causes of the staggering numbers we have in gender-based violence. Obviously, in Ghana, I don't know about other countries, we work so hard to alleviate this, even though it's not totally eradicated yet, but we are working towards that. And when we say FGM, which is female genital mutilation, what do we mean? So according to the World Health Organization, it is the partial removal or the total removal of some female genital organs. So now they are removing part of female genital organs, all because they don't want these girls to be sexually active. They don't want them to engage in teenage pregnancy. They don't want them to be sexually immoral. And this absolutely have no health benefit to the individual. It has no health benefit to the girls. Instead, it causes harm to them. It causes them severe pain, infection, in the long run. When they are older to get children, they have issues with childbearing. So it did not only affect their health, it also affect their self-esteem. I'm glad our psychologists mentioned the self-esteem being one of a focus in the GBV. It affects these girls mentally, because now my organs have been removed, or my organs have been covered because my parents or my norms or my religion doesn't want me to engage in sexual violence. And now I'm left with the pain. And the one pathetic part is the fact that some of the instruments used on these girls are not properly sterilized. So they have like 5 girls and they use one instrument for all the 5 girls, which is very terrible. So I would also say that is also a cause in the increasing gender-based violence in Africa as a whole. And also then other part of the question that says, what sign must we look out for in our communities that somebody is being affected by gender-based violence? And yes, I also want to point out the fact that when we say violence, it doesn't always mean the physical abuse or bullying or physical harassment. We have something we call structural violence. And this is a violence that is kind of normal in our community because it's not physical. So you can't see it physically on the person or the girl when she's violated. But this has a lot to do with unequal access to power, unequal access to opportunities as a woman, as a girl. So myself and a young man, we all went to school, we all have our PhD, we all have our degree or whatever. But when it comes to political appointments, when it comes to appointments at a workplace, they'll always appoint the men. Why? Because the ladies are supposed to be inferior. The ladies are expected to be vulnerable. So they can't work. They don't have the intellectual to work more. This is something we have to look on. So if in our communities, in your environment, you see that we have a workplace where ladies are equally competent, but yet still only the men get appointed for being the directors, and the women are always getting the secretary's position. The women are always left to the deputies without going for the head. We have to identify this and channel our focus on that. And yes, also going to the physical abuse. You have a friend who today that she's on spectacles, she's on glasses. This case is a practical example. I remember my roommate told me about a friend who came to school one time wearing glasses, and she asked her why. She was like, "Oh, nothing, is fashion."
Sorry, Josephine, just to remind you that kindly conclude. You're above the time limit.
Okay, please. Okay, so I'll conclude my point. So yes, indicating or identifying people in the community who have gender-based violence, we have to look out for their physical injuries. So are they having physical injuries on their body? You didn't see this today, tomorrow you are seeing physical. Ask them what, like you have to be concerned about these people. Ask them why, the reason for the physical abuse. And also fear and insecurity. You have a friend who's always scared to go to approach the men, always scared to go be in a quiet place. You have to ask her why, because all of these things, they go out in their house, married people go in their marriages, young girls go in their families, they actually project it outside. So I have to look on for that too. And also drug abuse. You see a girl, a woman, a young girl abusing drugs, you have to ask her why. Yes, so I would say these are some of the things we have to look out in identifying people in our community who have been violated by men or gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josephine, for that wonderful submission. We move on to the next category, which is speaker questions. And I will start with Josephine T. So Josephine, the question is, knowledge is power and education enlightens our African youth on various global trends. It can help them take the lead and be part of the solution to the challenges in our society. Gender-based violence is not a new subject. The conversation on GBV has been there even in our villages and learning institutions. Are the African education curriculum supportive towards eliminating GBV? What changes can be made and in what area can they be made? So Josephine, you can respond to these two-part questions that I've just read. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very, very much for the question. And yes, now the question is saying, are African educational curriculum supportive towards elevating gender-based violence? I would say yes, to a reasonable extent, because the education on this on GBV have been on the rise in secondary schools, in junior high schools, in the universities. Right now, we have seminars, we have annual or frequent seminars that educate us about the impact of gender-based violence and about those the person inflicting or melting out the violence to the person. We have education telling us about the penalties. So if you do that, this is what you face. And also as the girl, how to speak up when we are facing issues like this. And yes, I also say that in Africa right now, in Ghana specifically, women empowerment, I don't know, this year is obviously the order of the day. So we have programs, we have seminars, we have workshops, empowering women, telling us about our rights, about what we can do for ourselves and the community. And even in my university, University of Ghana, Legon, our very own vice chancellor is a woman. And she happens to be the first female vice chancellor in the University of Ghana. Her name is Professor Nana Aba Piamfu, which is a good sign. So making us see that, women can also be at the top. Women can also lead. In my department, theater department, for instance, our immediate past head of department is a woman. So obviously, as a young girl, as an undergraduate student as myself, I see and I know that, okay, if I study so hard, the society or the economic or even my country support the fact that women can be at the top. And I can go on and on mentioning cases in the rest of Ghana where we see women playing very vital in our education. And I would say that this is a positive step towards alleviating gender-based violence. And yes, obviously we have to intensify it because the rural areas are nothing region is unfortunately suffering when it comes to education and education, because we don't have schools. The high rate of illiteracy is quite there, more than I'll get as our capital, which is Greater Accra. So we have to intensify the education, making doing seminars, outreach programs as a school, as an university, in making sure that people get to know on gender-based violence. And yes, as a young lady, I might be experiencing violence, either structural violence, physical violence, discrimination, but I do not know where to channel my plight to. I do not know the appropriate institution to go and channel my case. Education has played a vital role in making us know, as a student, you know that DOPSU is there for you. You know that other acts in Ghana are there for you. I'm sure that other African countries also have this. And yes, we can also make our schools safe for students. So we can make our education environment safe for students, making sure that it is devoid of sexual exploitation. It is devoid from abuse, even from teachers or from fellow colleagues. We have to make sure that the security, like the boarding house, for instance, we make sure that the security are tight in order to prevent any occurrences of gender-based violence. So I would say in Africa or in Ghana specifically, the rights on gender, on women empowerment is on the rise. And even in our House of Parliament, for instance, this year we have more representation, more women representation in our House of Parliament. This year, I guess we have 40 years in the House of Parliament, unlike previous years where we don't have any women representation in our parliament. But right now, the fight is on women empowerment, gender equality, making sure that the women know our rights in the environment. And I would say the African curriculum can also contribute their quota in elevating GBV by supporting women to go into science, technology, mathematics, engineering, because these fields I just mentioned are mostly male-dominated. We don't have women openly going into mathematics, going into technological field, going into engineering, going into science and technology. So I feel if scholarship for girls are made available to them and opening the interest in women going into this field, I'm sure it will help. It will help in terms of representation. Yes. I guess I'll end here so my other colleagues can continue.
All right, thanks, Josephine, for that submission. And we move on to our next speaker, Jesus Eki. The question is, data is shaping the way we approach matters across the world, with new numbers and statistics every day. So far, we have had many cases reported on GBV, and despite these numbers, we are still seeing an increase in GBV. As Africans, are we putting data into use to create solutions to our challenges? Is there a need to invest more in research and development in terms of technology to curb GBV? How can artificial intelligence be used for collecting data on how much nations are committing to counteract GBV? Jesus, kindly unmute and submit. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, Jesus, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you very much for this wonderful question. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. In a world increasingly guided by data, we find ourselves at the crossroads in our fight against GBV. Data, the lifeblood of modern decision-making, pulses through our strategies and interventions, shaping our responses to this endemic issue. Despite a plethora of data on GBV, we continue to witness its distressing rise. This paradox raises pivotal questions. Are we, as Africa, effectively harnessing data to tackle GBV? Is there a latent potential in technology, particularly artificial intelligence, that we are yet to fully embrace? Let us first of all talk about the dichotomy of data in addressing GBV. Let us first consider this duality, the duality of our relationship with data. On one hand, data illuminates the hidden corners of GBV, revealing its extent and multifaceted nature. It also brings to light the silent price of millions. On the other hand, the very existence of this data growing day by day is a stark reminder of our ongoing struggle. It reflects our collective pain and the urgent need for action. As Africans, we must ask ourselves, are we merely collectors of data, or are we its architects, using it to build pathways to a safer future? The truth is, while data collection on GBV is robust, its translation into actionable solutions remains a challenge. This gap between what we do and what we do is where our focus must lie. We then have clearly on the board an imperative, the imperative of investing in research and technology. There is an undeniable need for increased investment in research and development, particularly in technological solutions. We are not lacking in data. We are lacking in tools and strategies that effectively leverage this data. Investment in technology is not merely a financial commitment. It is a commitment to innovation, to find new ways to combat an age-old scourge. In this whole picture, what is the role of artificial intelligence, especially towards GBV prevention? This brings us to the transformative potential of AI. Imagine AI algorithms that can sift through mountains of data, identifying patterns of GBV, predicting hotspots, and informing prevention strategies. Imagine AI systems that track the efficacy of policy as well as intervention, providing real-time feedback to governments and organizations. This is not the realm of fiction. It is a tangible possibility within our grasp. AI can also play a pivotal role in monitoring national and regional commitments to countering GBV by analyzing policy documents, funding allocation, and programs outcomes. AI can provide a clear picture of where we stand in our fight against GBV. It can also hold us accountable, ensuring that our commitments are not just word on paper, but actions on the ground. Therefore, as we stand united in this fight, my motto is to let us embrace data and AI, not just as tools, but as allies. Let us invest in the research and development that will unlock their full potential. Let us use this tool to not only understand the scale of GBV, but more especially to dismantle the structures that allows it to thrive. I urge each of us to look beyond the numbers and see the stories they tell. These are stories of pain, resilience, and hope. With data and AI as our guides, let us write new stories, story of strength, healing, and a future free from violence for all African women and girls. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesus, for that submission. We move on to our next speaker, and that's Mariam. So the question is, we currently have different civil societies in Africa championing for women's rights and calling to an end to all sorts of gender-based violence. In terms of policy formulation and advocacy, what would you suggest needs to be done differently to prevent GBV? What investments or recommendations do you propose? So it's in two parts. Mariam, kindly unmute and respond.
Thank you, Zengani. I think in my first submission, I thought I was answering to this question. My apologies. I thought this is the question we are answering to. I was even having just that discussion.
Okay.
So I think I'll just pick up from where
maybe just summarize what you had said. So
yeah, I'll maybe just pick up from where I stopped so that I can just do the parts that I did not really fully was able to tackle. So in terms of policy formulation, as I was saying before, I think what we need is a comprehensive policy that addresses GBV, because as per now, we have bits and pieces of policies that actually tackle different forms of GBV, the social, the emotional, the physical, but then they're just not so comprehensive in terms that they are not embedded in a sort way in our traditional cultural values, or in our own local. They are not well localized because the laws are very embedded in the human rights framework, which is also a very global and international sort of framework. But then there's need for the policies to actually be entrenched in also the local aspect and the sense of our culture and our own identity as a people. Because it's only in that way that we have that conversation between the state and the cultures. And if we don't have that kind of policy, then there's a disconnect in terms of what the policies are speaking to and what is actually in reality happening. So I think for that, in the sense of policy, there's really need of that. And there's also need for the policy, as in the policy formulation, there's also a need of implementation frameworks that allow for political and institutional accountability to the public. As for now, there's not political will. There's not that sense of feeling of the political will to end GBV. And then it passes as kind of a very not so tasteful message to the public, because if there's no political will and there's not really very good political goodwill in terms of ending GBV, then the people become reluctant in the sense of actually answering or caring about matters of GBV. In terms of advocacy, I had spoken about messaging, where in civil societies have a task on working on their messaging and how they actually present their issues and how they speak about GBV in the public, how they sensitize systems and structures. But also in terms of advocacy, I felt that, and also I mentioned about staying away and being intentional about not commodifying GBV. And also the fact that we need to onboard other sectors in our advocacy and the notion of GBV, as GBV itself cuts across different. It doesn't work in isolation. It's not an isolated narrative, but it's inextricably linked to other inbuilt structures of dominance, of power, of control, of tradition, and of the modern. In the essence, what somebody spoke about, the digital is the modern. So we need to speak on GBV in an actually inextricably linked narrative. And also the other very important aspect of advocacy that we need to do differently is, especially for grassroots organizations, we need also to think about kin-focused advocacy. When I talk about kin, I mean the kin, the relations, the more, it's like the primary basis of where GBV actually stems from. And the kin relations mostly when you look at the rural setups, GBVs are happening in homesteads, in families, and it's the first place where that advocacy is needed, because if they do not understand the need to speak about violence at a family level or at a kin relation level, then it becomes so hard for us to reach a national kind of advocacy level, because we focus so much on the public discourse, and we forget that there's the relational aspect of violence. So I think also we need to really focus on that kind of kin relation. And also we need, in the region I was working on, but it was health-related GBV, we have currently, even in Kenya as a whole, I think in Meru, in other parts of Kenya, there's this presence of GBV police offices. The GBV desks have been taken out to the police setup, and the police have actually designated some offices meant for GBV. But then advocacy in this sense is that the police themselves do not understand what they are really actually advocating for, because these policemen are still part of our community. They are part and parcel of these structures that have ignited or even started these GBV narratives. So there's also advocacy that is supposed to be geared mostly for governing structures. Like, we shouldn't just focus on communal or nationalistic kind of advocacy, but also structure-geared advocacy that is for different governing bodies in our communities, such as the police, because they are very key in ending GBV, and we should be very intentional in bringing them on board. In terms of investment, we should, as a Kenyan society, like, let's say African community, and also just narrowing it down to Kenya, I think there's a lot of we need to focus on investing on more informal psychosocial or medical support for survivors of GBV and publicize them. It's not only, we shouldn't just invest and have these shelters or these hotlines or where people can actually receive medical support, then make them so invisible that people don't know about them. Especially don't urbanize them. Don't make them to be a form of only those that can be reached at by the people who are medically or technologically aware. Let them also know that GBV cuts across also the illiterate, the people who are in the rural setups, the people who are marginalized and cannot access some form of communication. So we need to publicize and let the community know them and let them be functional. Because the problem we have in Africa is we have structures, we put on systems, but then we do not make them functional. We let them just die, become just as one part of parcel of having done something that is not doing anything for the community. So GBV shelters, though they are run by mostly civil societies and human rights organizations, we also need to actually advocate that the government should also be part of this. They should come up with their own, they should also be part of this, coming up with shelters and making them accessible and being able to utilized by the community. And I spoke about school-based curriculum because, as we know that.
Sorry, Mariam, kindly conclude.
Okay, I'm going to conclude. This was my last point. Okay, so this was my last point anyway, Zengara, sorry. I wanted to say I spoke about school-based curriculums, but then that is something I spoke about because, and the last point was invest in educating state actors on the importance of GBV mainstreaming across different government actors, such as the police. As I mentioned, police are very important for our GBV work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam, for that submission. We move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Fadet, and the question is, as we look forward to ending gender-based violence, there are still growing concerns on early childhood marriages. Educating young African women and girls is deemed as a solution to the various challenges facing women and girls, including GBV. Do you think more investment in education will bring GBV to an end? And how can this be achieved? For that, you can kindly submit. Fadet, can you hear me? Fadet, are you there? Maybe we've lost maybe poor connection. We can move on to the next speaker. We go to Yusuf Mani. The question is, currently we are seeing that globalization has contributed to the growth of corporate social responsibility and different programs that are specifically tied towards women and girls. This is a form of investment towards the liberation of women and girls. Can we state that the growth of gender inequalities and neglecting of the boy child in such programs and initiatives can be an indicator for growing cases of gender-based violence? What can be done to get everyone involved in the gender equality and prevention of GBV conversation? So those are the three-part questions for you, Yusuf. Kindly unmute and make your submission.
Thank you. Of course, engaging boys and men in such programs is very important. But for me, I cannot state that this is a form of investment is an indicator for growing GBV. As investing in women and girls' liberation, especially again economic liberation, is very important to reduce the GBV. When women need to be economically independent and have their source of income to be able to depend on themselves and refuse any form of GBV. So we cannot state that this kind of investment is a reason for growing cases of GBV. But again, we need to keep engaging everyone in community and in society to achieve gender equality and to fully liberate women and girls. For example, we don't need to make men more dependent on women income. Here in Egypt, especially in slum areas, you can find that a, a growing number of unemployed youth and men who are fully independent on working women and even there are their wives or their mothers or any other or and that sometimes their sisters. So we need to keep empowering women and girls and providing them with a real source of income and a real source of empowerment. But again, we need to keep everyone engaged and we need to raising their awareness about how they will gain from achieving gender equality, how they will benefit from achieving gender equality. Um, and at this stage, we need to keep the private sector engaged in this process. And uh, in Egypt, we have a good policies that enable or that willing to empower women economically. But for a lot of employers, especially men employers, it is better for them to hire men than hire women. So they don't realize how they will benefit from these policies and how they will benefit from uh, hiring women and not hiring women as in terms of quota or something, but hiring the more qualified women in these fields and giving them a fully empowerment tools to be able to achieve themselves and achieve companies' goals and policies. So we need to keep raising this awareness. We need to keep everyone so that achieving gender equality will not harm harm ourselves, and it will be a very great uh, have a very great impact on our societies and on ourselves. And we need to be more realized that when we are men talking about gender equality, we are talking from a point of privilege. We don't realize every struggle that every woman face every day in transportation, in companies, in the street. So we need to invest in women. We need to bring women on the table of designing interventions and on thinking how they need to be empowered, and let them talk and let them express themselves and invest in this in this process. It may be a longer process, but every one of us will benefit from it. We need to hear each other. We need to hear other voices, and we need to hear women voices, and don't think that we have the solution. Again, as I mentioned before, we need to keep in our mind intersectionality. We keep in our minds the communities that we are working at. Keep in our mind that we need to let women express how they want to be empowered and how they want to be engaged in this process. And finally, we need to raise this awareness, raise and engage everyone in this process, and let them believe that everyone will gain from this process and from achieving gender equality and stopping gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf, for that comprehensive submission. We move on to our next speaker. But so the question is, as we look forward to ending gender-based violence, there are still growing concerns on early childhood marriages. Educating young African women and girls is deemed as a solution to the various challenges facing women and girls, including GBV. Do you think more investment in education will bring GBV to an end, and how can this be achieved? Kindly unmute and share your submission.
Okay, thank you very much. Why more investment in education is not a solution to completely eradicate GBV. It plays a vital role in empowering individuals and promoting gender equality. And for make it happen, we have to collaborate with many strategy, which is government commitment and enforcing laws. We also need to engage our community because government should prioritize education and allocate sufficient researchers to ensure access to quality education for all children. By engaging our community and the religion leaders and the traditional authority, that is very crucial in changing social norms and the practice. And that is contributing to eradicate GBV and yearly marriage. We have also to do some conference and sensibilization for comprehensive sexual education. That is contributing to including comprehensive sexuality education in school. That is can help young girls with knowledge about their right to reproductive health and relationship. It's also important to work with school by give some scholarships to girls, because that is I'm sorry, that is help to improve the number of girls who can go to school. And we are also needed to train our teacher and support them by investing in teacher training programs that address gender bases. That will contribute to prevent gender-based violence and creating an inclusive and safe learning environment in crucial. We need also a collaboration among school and some NGO and the international organization. By collaboration with those international organizations will help many girls to be involved in different education, formation, and that is very crucial for eradicate as GBV. I can say that it's very important. It's not that addressing GBV and ending child marriage requires a multifaceted approach involving various. That is, I can say that is a job of all of us and all of our people, not only girls, but not only government, but all people and all association have to talk that problem as the problem. Because if girls and the women are not educated, that will contribute to the gender-based virus. Yes, I can talk that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fedette, for that comprehensive submission. We move on to our next speaker. Anton An. So the question is it true that men are the main cause of abuse in marriages and GBV cases? If investment is the way to go, what new changes and investments in conflict management can be made to curb the increase of GBV cases? What resources are available for men and boys to explore in helping support the end of GBV? So, Anthony, kindly unmute and share your submission.
Yeah, thank you once more for giving me the floor, Mr. Moderator. Great perspectives that have been shared there by previous speakers, which I, in the course of my submission, I'm going to re-echo just a few of them. But first, let me start with the basic question. Is it true that men are the perpetrators of gender-based violence? I don't think that question actually requires an answer from me. I think that the panel is going to be very unanimous on my feedback with respect to that. I'll say yes. Why? Firstly, because the patriarchal nature of the African society automatically exposes men to this. If you look at all of our institutions, be it from the political space to even the traditional spaces, the international organizations, business corporations, and civil society organizations, 90% of these institutions are largely made by men. So if you look at violence from a structural point of view, we have more men who are prone to commit these abuses. So yes, men are in a large majority the perpetrators of this violence. But equally, if you want to look at it from an emotional perspective, we have rights to think that men are equally perpetrators of this. But there is another kind of violence I would like to emphasize on, which is many a times not spoken about or underreported, the aspect of verbal violence. You know, many of us have been speaking about physical violence, sexual abuse. We've been speaking about economic, socioeconomic violence. Generally, this kind of violences are meted by men. So there's no argument as to who are the perpetrators. But the aspect about verbal violence, Mr. Moderator, I won't be the one to tell you who is the largest perpetrator of verbal violence. I think I'm going to allow that for the panel to think about it, because we all know people who are more proficient in practicing this kind of violence. So let me just leave that open for anyone who cares to answer. So, but generally, my submission on that is men are largely the perpetrators of gender-based violence. And I'll move to the second part of your question, which is about investments. What sort of investments needs to be done? This is a very important aspect I would like to emphasize on. Firstly, let me start with the individuals. Looking at it from a conflict perspective, gender-based violence has to do with two persons. And in conflict, we will qualify that as an interpersonal conflict. That's something that has to do within two persons. And so one of the ways in which we need to invest to ensure that we are mitigating or ending gender-based violence is to ensure that human beings, I'm talking about men, I'm talking about women, we need to build our skills and competencies in alternative modes of dispute resolution. Why is this important? This is important because violence in many times, in many cases, is not usually the first recourse to a misunderstanding. I think everyone here can testify to that. People don't just get up and become violent. I mean, violence is the end point or the product of some sort of heated misunderstandings, disagreements that have been ongoing for quite a good period of time. And many a times it is the weakness, it's the inability of people to practice this alternative mode of dispute resolution that recurses to gender-based violence. And so very quickly, one of the ways in which we need to invest is to build the capacity of men and women in implementing alternative modes of dispute resolution. What do I mean by alternative modes? We need to build a capacity to negotiate. We need to build a capacity to dialogue. We need to build a capacity to mediate. So this is one way in which we need to invest. This is one avenue where we need to invest. That's for individuals. I'll move on to the socioeconomic aspect about it. Whether you like it or not, Mr. Moderator, poverty remains one of the underlying causes of gender-based violence. I tell you the truth, there are many women, just the fear that they are going to have to live in poverty pushes them to stay enclosed within the four walls of a certain space. Many a times when we talk about economic empowerment of women, what many people have been doing is sensitization campaigns, organizing gatherings. But I think we need to shift a little bit into concrete actions that empower women. We need to ensure that women are gaining opportunities. Women need to have access to take care of themselves. They need to have the means to take care of themselves. Women empowerment should not just be all about sensitization or campaigns. We need to ensure that we are creating favorable business conditions where women who are naturally entrepreneurial can thrive. Because there is evidence that women can do well in terms of business and financial management that men can do. So we need to create favorable business spaces where women can thrive. And we need to limit all the sensitization campaigns we have been doing for the past years. Or better still, we need to increase more opportunities for women. So this is one area, one economic area where we need to invest. Thirdly, I want to look at it equally from a legal perspective or a structural perspective. You see, I heard one of the previous speakers talk about policies that are existing, and maybe we don't have a lot of policies, or I can't rephrase that exactly, but somebody spoke about policies that are part of the problem. I agree that policies are part of the problem, but to be very frank with you, we have a lot of policies in Africa, so much written in the books, and the problem is implementation. Let me take a simple case with Cameroon, for example. If you look at the country I come from, Cameroon, we have 180 parliamentarians, and we have 100 senators. Let me look at the case of senators. Amongst the senators, 70 are voted. 3 are appointed by the head of state. It will shock you to believe that amongst 30 are appointed by the head of state, I beg your pardon. Amongst the 30 people who are appointed by the head of state as senators in the last appointments, 26 of them were men and only 4 were women. When you submit a case, a law at a level, a bill at the level of the parliament, who do you think is going to uphold the voices of women? Of course, we don't have that representation. So it's not all about policies. I agree, maybe the policies may not be there, but I strongly think we have policies. We have them written in the books. We have mapped all sorts of policies. Our problem is implementation. Our problem is who are the people who are supposed to sustain these policies in the favor of women. This is an aspect we need to work on. We need to ensure that women are included in critical decision-making spaces. Women are part of the leadership processes. Women are part of peace operations. It's very important that we move the narrative to that extent. We don't necessarily need to allow the patriarchal nature of the African society give men all the autonomy to decide, including of the fate of women. So this is some sort of structural reform that needs to be carried out. Fourthly, we need to invest in strengthening civil society and community-based organizations. This is a very important aspect because I believe 90% of the panelists here belong to one civil society organization or the other. And one thing I have noticed in Africa is many organizations are born every day. Many organizations and many associations are born every day. Everybody is into advocacy. Everybody is into community action. But the shocking thing is many people don't have the skill. Many people don't have the competence. Many people don't have the knowledge on how to lead these advocacies. Yet, we have civil society organizations on the field. So it's important for us to invest in strengthening the capacity of civil society organizations and community-based organizations. This is an utmost aspect where we need to invest. Why? Because CSOs and CBOs are closer to the population. They are the first persons who get these cases. They are the first persons who identify these cases. The government systems are sometimes a little bit too structured in a way that they cannot provide immediate or tailored responses. So there is a need for us to strengthen the civil society organization in such a way that immediately cases like that are identified, they can provide well-tailored responses. So we need to limit the proliferation of civil society organizations that have not built the necessary competencies to arrest cases of gender-based violence. That's why we have civil society organizations that receive funding and they are unable to implement well-tailored measures. They just go about organizing many campaigns we have seen before, sensitization, but yet there is no concrete action that changes the status quo or transforms women. So there are initiatives, there are programs that we need to implement to strengthen the CSO. One aspect I would like to touch again, one area where we need to invest is that of media reporting. This is a very critical aspect I have had to observe. I'm sure that you would have discovered, I don't know what the case may be in your countries, but in Cameroon, one thing I have noticed is when a woman or a young girl is raped, it's not the picture of the rapist who is advertised. The first picture you find on social media is that of the young girl and it's that of the woman. So who are we exposing to the public? It's the woman, it's the young girl. I think this is a narrative that needs to change. By so doing, we make them build a wall of confinement around themselves. We make the women and the young girls look like they were the ones who perpetrated this act. Instead of us even trying to advertise the perpetrators so they can be brought to books, many a times it's the people who are raped, it's the people who are battered. They're the ones we are quick to advertise on our social media accounts. So one way we need to, one area where we need to invest is our media reporting. This is work that we have to do with our bloggers, we have to do with our civil society organizations, and all those who are active on the social media space. We need to invest in this space. Last but not the least, an area where I think we need to channel investments is the health sector. There is an absolute need for us to have clinics that provide post-traumatic stress disorder to victims of rape. This is one aspect that is lacking. And I heard somebody earlier talk about lack of finances to attend to people who were raped. It's true. But besides accessibility, we need to talk about affordability.
Kindly conclude.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I was practically touching on the last points here. So regarding the health aspect, we need to talk about two things. Firstly, accessibility and affordability. Firstly, we need to ensure that there is access to care for people who suffer gender-based violence. Secondly, we need to ensure that this access, though when they find the access is quite affordable, we need to avoid making the whole thing look like a business venture. And this is what scares so many young girls and women from reporting cases. So these are two aspects where we need to invest in terms of health. The last aspect about your question, which talks about what resources are available for men, I'm going to say there are two things men have. Men have the will, and secondly, men have their voices. If men truly uphold this fight like it's their own cause, I think that we are going to have many persons advocating for women. We need to cease from looking at gender-based violence as if it's just the women who are supposed to be fighting against this. The first thing we all men need to have is the will, the intent to accept this as a collaborative approach, as a general fight. And secondly, we need to add our voices to those of women to ensure that we all are having the same, we are the same level of information and we are leveraging on these issues. So these are, in a summary, some of the points I wanted to touch on. Thank you once more for giving me the floor. And that's my submission, Mr. Moderator.
Thanks, Anthony, for that comprehensive submission. We move on to our last but not the least speaker, Anastasia Duru. So the question is, do you think the efforts that government, civil societies, and human rights movements are making to end GBV are working for Africa? Are there working measures taken here in Africa that our diverse societies can emulate on ending GBV? As young people, what steps can we take to be more gender resilient and even be part of the gender equality conversation? Anastasia, kindly unmute and share your submission.
Okay. Thank you for the wonderful question, moderator. I'm going to finish this webinar by answering. I think, yes, the efforts that government, civil societies, and human rights movements are making to end GBV are working in Africa. As I said previously, we see women's and other speakers, what they said, we see women's continue being given opportunities, to vote, to workplaces. Here in Tanzania, we see even women are being elected in higher positions, and we see even when we come to families, women are able to speak out on their rights and get their rights right. And when you see, even when they go to court, they're given their rights at the end. So I think that the efforts that the government and civil society are doing are working in Africa. And then the second question that says, are there working measures taken here in Africa that our diverse society can emulate on ending GBV? I think, yes, there is working measures that are being taken, like the reformations of some laws. We see women be given opportunities and other in so many areas. And we also see, like, at the end of the day, the people who are caught as culprits, like they did the GBV in the women's, or the children, the girls, we see they are given the punishment that they deserve. So I feel like those are the working measures, and these measures also we see they are taken in reformations of laws. They are taken as people campaigning, as we're doing today, and all other measures that they're taking. As young people, I think the steps that we can take is first to educate ourselves about the issues of equality. Because when we see this younger generation, or our younger generation, is the future parents of we are the future parents. So when we are educated about equality, it will make us be able to make a society that is free from gender violences. Since we educate, we have already have the information that we need, and we are going to pass that information to our children. And then that will enable our children to make equal. So with organizations or groups that work to promote gender equality, this will enable us first to make the efforts to participate in those efforts, in those movements, and know in a wide capacity and reach out to so many people. First, our youth in rural areas and other areas that is hard for them to be reached out. But when we participate in organization and the groups that does this, it will enable us to be able to promote gender equality. Another thing is to use our social media platforms to share information and resources about gender. What you know about gender is not the other younger people know. And as we see in the recent years, or in our years, globalization has made the social medias, like the medias that are used with youth as much. So if we use our social medias as youth to promote the gender equality, it will enable other youth, other people, younger generation that are coming up to understand more about the equality, gender equality, what does it mean? And this will make them shape themselves from the beginning, either by seeing or by observing what other people are doing. We might act as their role model, and they start making change wherever they are. And another thing is to speak out, speak up and speak out when you see or hear something that is not gender equal. So when we start from ourselves as a younger generation to know where to speak out and speak up when you face a gender issue, it will enable, it will prevent the victim to continue victimizing another people. So when we do that, the laws will take its direction and punish those who have done the violence, and this will prevent this person to hurt another person in the future. And this will act as one thing that will make the gender equality conversation and gender resilience. And another thing that I can add there is advocating for policies, programs that advance gender equality. So when we advocate as youth, will enable another youth to understand more and engage more. So that's my point, and that's my addition in my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia, for that comprehensive presentation. We move on to the part for the Q&A from the audience. So we now invite the audience who have questions. Kindly unmute, say your name and your country, and then ask a question. And then any of the speakers can respond to your question. Yeah. So raise your hand or unmute, and then you can. Kindly unmute if you have a question, or raise your hand. Okay, let me just read from the chats. So we have, how can we tackle women violence that are seen in religions? In my country, for instance, many religions criticize and insult girls, women by their dressing. Okay. Then from Mafuru, Director CV Children, Tanzania, GBV is beyond physical abuse. On my view, physical abuse is a result of emotional violence, which triggers the physical assault of most women and young girls. We meet emotional abuse and perhaps is a result of future abuses. We observe nowadays mothers do to their own children too. I think we need to rethink and redefine GBV as the era evolves. Then we have, how do we handle GBV perpetrated by other women, bearing in mind that patriarch system can has cemented women as gatekeepers of some harmful cultural practices? How can we dismantle the social norms that have normalized other women abusing women? Okay, so I think any of the speakers can respond to at least the first three questions that I've just read. Kindly feel free to unmute and just share your thoughts in under a minute since we're behind time. So the first one is that how can we tackle women violence that are seen in religions? Yeah, I think that is the first question. Any of the speakers can come in and share your thoughts and ideas on this question. Kindly just go in and
Hello?
yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, so if I understand, we are talking about the question related to religion. How can we tackle women violence that are seen in religions? In my country,
Yes.
for example. That's it, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I think that the point that that was raised here is more related to the issue about criticizing and insulting girls and women by their dressing. This boils down to the sort of violence I was talking about, verbal violence. All right. When I was talking about verbal violence earlier, I personally did not want to raise the fact that this is largely orchestrated by women. And coincidentally, one of the attendees has raised the issue in the chat box and was quite explicit on the issue, saying that this kind of violence is largely perpetrated by other women who criticize other women for their dressing. So not only is she responding to something I had asked, but she's raising something which is quite explicit. I think the issue related to verbal violence, that's the angle from which I would like to address her question. How do we tackle such kind of violence? I think it's more about dialogue. It's more about dialogue, and secondly, it's more about sensitization. Somebody was saying earlier that physical violence is a result or an effect of emotional torture or emotional abuse. I think that if we talk to people, if we let people understand what the power of their voices, what the things they say to people, what the effects could be on other psychology, I think this can help in one way to mitigate the rate at which many persons practice verbal violence. For many women, they believe that they don't have that physical ability. Their physical countenance does not permit them engage in a physical confrontation with other people. So they base their own violence a lot on their words, on what they say. And sometimes this is even more devastating. It has more drastic consequences than many other cases, even including physical violence. So I think that one of the ways we need to arrest this sort of violence, again, we need to talk about, we need to sensitize people, firstly, on how this violence affects people and what the consequences of verbal violence can be. So people don't use verbal violence as an escape route, but they see it more like an early warning to some sort of physical violence to follow. So we need to invest more in terms of sensitization, letting people know that verbal violence is in most cases more critical than physical violence. So this is one way. It does not matter the space, be it the political space, the religious space, even in classrooms, it's still verbal violence. And so we need to let people know what the power of their words can actually do and how this affects other people. So I'll end here for now, probably step in case of more clarifications. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony, for that comprehensive response. Because I saw the first three questions, and the only questions we have were centered on that question, whereby there's a concern that women sometimes inflict violence on other women, or in the name of being gatekeepers. And I think you have tackled it very well. I think those are the major clarifications and questions we had. So I think we shall wrap up our webinar, but before we go, I just want to remind the audience and the speakers about the VAWG Bootcamp, which is an intensive training program for young African entrepreneurs in trade or wishing to be involved in trade. It is VAWG's 8th biannual bootcamp, slated to take place at Future Center University from the 21st February to the 25th February 2024, under the theme Breaking Information Barriers on Intra-Africa Trade, Accelerating Youth Inclusiveness in Implementing the AFCFTA. The iBootcamp will bring together over 350 youths and prominent professionals in person and over 5,000 virtually from Africa and abroad. The iBootcamp provides a platform to connect with dedicated investors and overcome the challenges of securing capital. The program offers comprehensive training for business expansion and prepares participants for financing. The VAWG Bootcamp is unique in that it connects participants with actual Anglo investors, funds, debt providers who support exceptional youth businesses. We are pleased to announce that we have already confirmed the Afreximbank, UNDP, UNECA, ITC, and AFCTA Secretariat as partners in the successful organization and implementation of the event. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to grow a business as a young entrepreneur in Africa. We invite all young entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs to register using the link provided on the slide and also provided in the chat box. We also urge all participants to follow VAWG on all social medias, register for your mailing list for the latest news on African development. So kindly like, follow VAWG on all social media platforms so that you can hear all the latest updates relating to scholarships, entrepreneur opportunities, training, and other exciting news about Africa and news doing amazing things. Lastly, I would like to thank the wonderful speakers who reserved their time and effort to share their thoughtful ideas in our webinar. We appreciate and we thank all the members who joined us in the webinar. Thanks, and we appreciate and grateful for your input. And good evening. Bye.